Welcome everyone to our latest webinar, which is supported by the Office for Product Safety and Standards within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. The Eastbourne Hospitality Association is committed to supporting hospitality businesses, and today we're talking with East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service to talk about the general overview of the role of the fire service, where small businesses and our members of medium size and large size can go for support, and then also looking at some of the common areas of concern that are coming up from previous audits, and also when we start to move out of COVID. I'm joined here today by Raj Baksi from East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service. Welcome, Raj.
Hello, thank you very much indeed. Pleasure to be here.
From my point of view, I own a small guest house. And so, I'm conscious of how much I'm spending on, professional advice. What is out there in terms of what support you can do as your own business?
Absolutely, and that's a really good question, and one that I'm sure many business owners will be keen to, hear an answer to, and I'm very happy to provide it. Now, there's different guides available, and I think perhaps, really key to this is a guide called Do You Have Paying Guests? It was produced by the government and the Chief Fire Officers Association, and it provides a step-by-step guide for suitable businesses to follow through to carry out their risk assessment. I said suitable businesses because it's small businesses. If you have a larger concern, then you may need to use the other guides to complement the work that's being performed. So the other guides are the government guides. They're known as the fire safety guides. There's 13 in total, and there are ones for sleeping accommodation and others that may be relevant to your business. So they provide more detailed explanations with information about frequency of testing and maintenance and things that you may seek from a third-party accredited company. And then, of course, there's also the Pink Book, which is also a guide to legislation for the tourist accommodation. And that also provides an excellent source of information to help businesses meet their legal obligations.
Brilliant. So, Raj, obviously the fire service is still there as a support, but one of the things that obviously has changed over the years is that the legislation has moved that the fire service no longer inspect businesses anymore.
Yes, absolutely. So if we receive a complaint, or of course if there's been a fire, then we will send officers in order to carry out an audit of the organisation. But in terms of our resources for East Sussex, we need to focus and prioritise our available resources on the key priorities for safety of the public. And as such, those visits no longer take place. But of course, we do still have our business safety offices and the online support and all of the other various resources to steer and guide organisations to meet their legislative requirements.
Raj, one of the things that I've been talking to one of your colleagues about is the fire service no longer does inspections anymore. And that sometimes the perception is that when you do come around to do an inspection, it can cost us quite a lot of money.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that is a perception that people have. Now, as an organisation, we would love to be able to visit every single workplace and provide reassurance and confidence to both staff and owners. But unfortunately, we just don't simply have the resources to do that. We do have a list, a priority list that we need to target. And of course, we need to make best use of our resources to achieve that. If you think about hospitals and residential care homes, where the risk is particularly high, unlike your residents, people aren't able to just get out and walk out the building on their own. They need assistance, support and reliable fire protection to achieve this. So yes, people do have a concern that legislation can seem like a burden. But actually, as an organisation, we're keen to help people achieve their legislative requirements. And I think, whilst it can seem like a bit of a headache, in reality, it's quite achievable without having these frequent visits from the fire officer. People of old will recall a more proactive style of work and more visits on a more frequent basis. But unfortunately, we simply don't have the resources to achieve that. We are targeting those most at risk. And as I say, if you need our help, you mustn't feel as if you've been abandoned and left out in the cold. The support is there. And of course, people need to come forward and seek it from our offices. And it's very feasible and plausible that we may direct you onto online resources, but really that's the key there. You can receive signposting from a credible source, leading you to credible support and help for your organisation.
I wondered, Raj, if you could just talk us through, when we've talked to some of your colleagues, they've talked to us a little bit about some of the common issues that come up when the fire service do have to do audits on businesses. I wondered if you could just touch on that with us at the moment, just what's been coming through from the past.
Yes, of course, absolutely. So, one of the problems we experience is where your residents may interfere with your fire precautions. Things like the wedging open of fire doors. I mean, everybody understands, and if you ask anyone in the street about fire doors, everyone will roll their eyes and mention that they get wedged open sometimes. And the reason people wedge them is because they're hot or cold, or they, want ventilation, or they want to be able to hear their children in the next room, whatever the excuse may be. But fire doors serve a really fundamental role in terms of your fire protection within your buildings. Smoke detector heads, finding ways of covering them up. And of course, the reason for this is not to do anything to do with fire, it's to smoke. And of course, you might know that aerosols can set off detectors as well. But of course, really, covering up the smoke detector is almost as turning it off, and could be massively significant in a fire, particularly when people are asleep. So it reminds us, of course, that everybody involved in the organisation, whether that be your housekeeping staff or whether that be hotel managers themselves, being eyes and ears around the premise in order to keep an eye out for these, common problems. So particularly doors, particularly detection. And then there's things like fire extinguishers getting moved. Again, whether people move them maliciously or not is debatable, but they may put it somewhere else. And I think another issue is storage of unsuitable things in cupboards. So if you have an electrical intake cupboard, one needs to be mindful of not having it full of fire load. And also locking doors. Don't wish to make everybody sound as if there's lots of unscrupulous people around, but if doors to vulnerable areas aren't locked, that presents a risk. And a vulnerable area could be electrical items, it could be cleaning products, it could be flammable materials. Those areas we need to be particularly mindful about.
Thanks for that. I think that's really interesting. And one of the things that I've come across in my own business is during this lockdown, we've been doing work on some of our rooms. So to protect the the smoke detectors from getting too dusty and things, we have sort of protected them. And I think that's a really good point that, especially if lots of people have been doing various different, works, that they can just go around and check their rooms before they reopen.
Absolutely. So your smoke detector head is going to look a bit like that, obviously from the ceiling. And the approved method would be a purpose-made cover that would go over it. But of course, that's only for approved systems, following a safe system of work within your organisation, fitting this in with your risk assessment and your fire panel, and making sure that staff understand, the significance of when we can and can't use these protected covers. But as we say, we're not talking about that specifically here. This is more about residents bypassing the system so that they can smoke and such like. But you're absolutely right. When you're doing your building work, and as you say, now has been a really significant time where changes may have been necessary. It is, of course, appropriate to manage your fire alarm and prevent false alarms, because that's another subject, of course, which is preventing calling the fire service if it's an aerosol or paint or sawdust that's activated the alarm. But of course, that brings us back that you need to have a fire plan that staff are able to work with. If the alarm sounds and it's not clear what activated the alarm, then of course we need to follow our in-house systems and our emergency plans.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we've experienced in our membership is that there is a real diversity in terms of businesses who claim to be able to do various different things for you. And one of the things that areas that we're hearing from our membership as well is that lots of companies are contacting people, especially now around COVID, saying we can help you comply with this and we can help you comply with that. And I think there's quite a lot of confusion and a bit of uncertainty to think, well, actually, what do we have to comply with and what do we have to do as a business in hospitality? I wondered if you could just go over kind of like the benchmarks and...
Yes, absolutely. I mean, sorry, the Institution of Fire Engineers, the IFE, have this approved register that I just mentioned briefly. But as you say, you can feel as if you're being bombarded from all angles with people who, market in such a way that it does appear to be a genuine offer of help. But of course, understandably, one needs to be guarded about these things. So you want to seek information that is fit for purpose and actually factually relevant to your organisation. And as you say, there are possibly unscrupulous businesses out there, suppliers, not businesses, who may manipulate the situation to offer services that aren't helpful in terms of, I'm not saying that they give bad service, but they may confuse matters and bombard you with information that then becomes difficult to decipher. So to assist organisations, there's some excellent fire safety guides produced by the government. They're accessible online, and there's also some additional support. There's a guide called Do You Have Paying Guests? That was produced by the Chief Fire Officers Association. You can download that from our website. There's also the Pink Book legislation, which is also specifically for your type of organisation.
Just the final question really from me, which is just around as we start to come out of lockdown, have you got any sort of top things that you're really looking at from a fire service point of view and advice to businesses about as we start to enter into trading again?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, it's a time that we're all looking forward to. When you have an increase in residents, of course, that will change or return back to perhaps a sense of normality. But there may well have been changes in your organisation. You may have been doing things differently. You may have created more space. In creating more space, you may require more storage. Storage on escape routes, of course, is a big issue. So we need to be confident that means of escape are accessible, that doors do open. And, there will have been, during this quieter period, a time where areas may have been perhaps overlooked in terms of checking. So we just remind everybody to walk your escape routes, check your final exits open adequately, that you can access fire extinguishers, that call points are accessible, that really, of course, you're back, fully able to function. It is acknowledged that there's a lot going on when you reopen a business. And I think really from a safety perspective, it's just to revisit and be satisfied that everything's in full working order.